Good morning, good evening, good day, greetings, and a helping side of salutations with something like a welcome to go with the Safe Room featuring Security Side Quest. My name is Tristan Watty, and I am joined by the marvelous Mr. himself, Russ. How's it going?
Hey, how you doing, Tristan? Happy Monday.
Yes, happy Monday, and for you who are on the East Coast, happy snowy day to you.
Yeah.
Yes. Little bits and pieces, right, of snow, but we shall warm up with some great security talk. But
the fire is gonna warm us all up.
Yes, it's our passion for security, right? It burns hot. So, with that being said, if this is your first time here, your first stream, let us take the rewind a couple steps backwards to reintroduce ourselves the proper way, because my name is Tristan Watty. I come to you from the Professional Services Division of AWS as a senior security consultant, where we help to accelerate customers' journey to the cloud in a secure manner, fashion, form, way. And I have to take the dramatic pause to also say, Russ, where are you coming from?
I'm Russ. I'm coming from the Security Incident Response Engineering team. Mostly dealing with the security incident response service. So that's always fun. If you ever have a bad day, you'll probably be talking to this guy right here.
That guy. And speaking of talking, is our producer, Jeff. As always. Hi, Jeff. And Ari, as always, thank you. Stay warm, right? That is the theme of the day. But the theme of the day is community. And with that being said, where's our community dialing in from, tuning in from, listening from, or just plain old watching a second screen content? So feel free to put that in. And I think today's second question, we usually go with the or questions, but I think the question we go with is, what's your favorite winter food?
Oh, that's a tough one.
Yeah. Yeah. Feel free. And while you think of that, Benton, hello from Germany. Thank you for tuning in. And Ari from LA, where we are snow free. I will mail you a snowball, Ari. Thank you.
Yeah, like one of those little packages that shoots out all the glitter. Instead, it's snow.
Just snow. Yeah.
Man, that's such a good one. I think I'm gonna have to go with my classic, which is just some chicken noodle soup. I mean,
yeah.
Like when I come out from the snow shoveling and stuff, that's what I think of.
Yeah, it's a good choice. It's, as you mentioned, it's a classic, right? Exactly. You can't go wrong. If somebody has chicken noodle soup, you're like, I'll have a little bit of taste of that, right? And for me, it's the good old, let's say, porridge, right? Ooh, so porridge it's porridge with a side of dumplings or bakes. Really great. If you haven't had it, you should try it. Right, that is my tip for today.
Well, now you're making me hungry.
Yes, see, exactly. When you hear porridge, you're like, ooh, and then when you hear a side of something with that, goes great. But if we're speaking of sides, I think it's important to speak about today's topic as we transition over. Russ loves my segues. Because
I was waiting.
Side, right? Of detective control, but no spoilers. Russ, where did we come from last week and where are we going today?
Yes, so last week's episode, which you do not have to have seen to be able to follow along with this week's episode, was World 1-2, Power Up Collected, Landing Zone Accelerator Activated. This week, we're going to progress to World 1-3, Lens of Truth Obtained, which is our Detective Controls Unlocked episode.
Yes.
We're going to get a little bit deeper into it. Yeah.
And it's interesting because I wanted some unlocked sound effects and stuff like that, and all I could think of was just applause. That's all, right? Just loud applause, right? It's just unlocked. But I think to drill into that, to dive deep, what we're speaking about is, hey, we came from a control tower setup, greenfield environment. Then we enhanced that through a landing zone and the acceleration that comes with it. And then we went to, hey, how do we continue on this path of growth? And I think that's the interesting concept, because where we start to let's say, lead customers, to influence customers, is to start thinking about your detective and preventative controls. So spoilers for next week, what we're talking about is preventive. But this week, detective controls. How do we get visibility into our environment? If you get the reference to today's title, 10 billion points to you, but it comes from a certain video game where, in order to see the path forward, a certain inventor that wore green had to use the lens of truth to unlock those different pieces, those different areas in their dungeon. So this is the same path we're going down is, hey, when we look at our environment, can we see everything? And it's one of those questions, can you really answer? Right? Because detective controls, they form that visibility layer, right, within your AWS architecture. And it complements preventative controls, next week spoilers, right, which are guardrails, SCPs, things of that nature. But what we're really doing is we're trying to look into things, right? So we're going to speak about certain services that are enabled through our landing zone. But how do we continue to build upon those, right? Because as you build out your maturity level within AWS, you start to get to a point where you say, hey, I have so many accounts. Where are all those logs go? Are the proper services there to reveal the potential threats within my environment? And can I have them structured in such a way that they alert me, right? Can I have the combinations that work, right? The guard duty, security hub combo, right? It's one of those combos you use face up, right? If you're playing a card game of a certain variety. But where you want to go next is, hey, how do we make sure if we're moving towards certain compliance standards that we have the correct items? Let's say compliance checks, right? Spoilers again. CIS benchmark, foundational security, best practice, HIPAA. How can we tell? How can we have the visibility into that? That's kind of where we're going, right? And eventually it'll expose some of those hidden paths that we were discussing. Because CloudTrail has a lot of API calls that it's following. But how do we kind of go through that in, let's say, a succinct manner, right? Because you have so many things you're trying to search, you're trying to do ad hoc queries. From Russ's side, might be doing a whole lot through viewing of CloudTrail logs. So, Russ, just a quick piece of this is how important are being able to search CloudTrail logs from your side of the fence?
Huge. Even for little things, just being able to confirm whether that guard duty alert is a positive or false negative. Well, true negative. But you know, those things, those are where those logs exist. That's how you find out what actually happened. So getting to the bottom of things, making changes, persistence mechanisms. I mean, everything. I use CloudTrail for all of those things, and more. So yeah, it's definitely vital for sure.
Yes, but wait, and there's more.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and that's just how I do things from a reactive side, but going into the proactive side, I mean, there's a million more things, right? So definitely.
Exactly, right? Because you want to make sure that your vision is maximized, right? And that's one of the pieces that we're going to speak about today. When you're looking at your landing zone, right? How do you centralize those logs, and which logs do you centralize? That's often a question that we hear a lot from customers is, do I need something like VPC flow logs? And spoilers again, yes. Because if you look at certain things,
plus like, 1,000,
yeah. One of the key items is an instant response guide from AWS. It maps out some of the key logging sources, and we'll save a little piece of that for later. But that's one of the places you want to start looking at. So when you're thinking about how to unlock your detective controls, those are the type of pieces that you start to dive into. But I think often customers start from this standpoint is, hey, I have some invisible threats in my environment and I'm afraid of them, right? From your standpoint, Russ, which one of these have you heard the most from customers?
So I would probably say number 2, misconfigured resources hiding in plain sight. That's the most common that I've dealt with, but it's a little bit of everything. But yeah, I think the biggest one would probably be number 2, but I think 1 and 4 are also very, very close second, concerns for most.
Yeah, it's a tough one because you hear it a lot in different contexts, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, as always, chat, feel free to put 1, 2, 3, or 4 for whichever one that that you say, hey, this might be lurking within my environment. So, from my vantage point, kind of where it starts to come into place is, hey, do I have any compliance violations I don't know about? The reason why I go towards number 3 is often the case of how do I prepare for this framework or this regulation or just our own internal audits. And that's usually the piece that drives a lot of the initiatives to say, hey, let's fix this, right? Let's bring in somebody who knows about this topic, right? So how can we architect better for these items, right? Because we might have something that doesn't meet compliance. And that what kind of drives a lot of fear is not being able to live up to the compliance standards. And then that drives, hey, we have some unauthorized API calls. Hey, we have some misconfigured resources, right? Those are the kind of pieces of the puzzle that we see get put together in certain ways. But if we look into it a little bit more in depth, right, and really kind of go closer a little bit, right, to the problem, or to the heart of the problem, is going back to that lens of truth, is what is our source of truth when we're looking at our environment? There's so many different AWS services that you can get into, especially from a detective control standpoint. But I think part of the conversation also goes to, do we understand all the detective controls that are in our environment? Because AWS has a suite, right? It has a football field worth of different detective services. You have guard duty, you have security hub, you have CloudTrail, you have config, you have detective, and the list kind of goes on and on. And if you're new to the cloud, this might be overwhelming. But the secret sauce is think of it more like a recipe. Right? See where I'm going? Sauce, recipe. We're going to make something delicious. Once you have the combination, you have the end result, which is a cake, a dish, or whatever the case may be, because you find how all these different services work together in tandem in order to provide that visibility and that coverage to view or peek, or I'm running out of adjectives for it, but seeing the different threats across your environment to make sure that you're meeting those compliance standards, the API activity, resource configuration, all these different items. And these all complement your control tower, right? It's the fundamentals of, hey, I have a control tower in a landing zone. I have certain pieces of it. How do I continue to build upon that? And it's such a powerful thing just having visibility organization-wide to be able to enable something that reports in, right? You have your different security tools like guard duty and be able to aggregate the findings of guard duty and security hub and config across a ton of member accounts. And a ton is a good metric to go by. So when you think about it, Russ is my joke ratio to Russ smiling. I'm working on that for 2026. So when you think of that relationship, it's great, right? That we have, it's almost like detective and preventative, right? When you think about it. So if I'm on the detective side, or if I'm on the preventative side, it shouldn't matter. All of it should work in tandem together. Right? That's the key takeaway, right? If you wanted to walk off into the sunset and it's just like, I have detective and preventative balance. I think part of that is understanding the defense in depth approach that you need to take within your environment to figure out how all these controls work together. So I think when you start to get to let's say, guard duty and security hub. Russ, when you're carrying out, let's say, investigation, how important is it to you?
Oh, I mean, extremely important. Like, I mean, if you get an alert, where do you go? What do you do? I mean, that's my first stop. Getting the information from these, different alerts or detective controls, whatever you want to call them. You can't just stop there. Hey, we alerted. Good job, everyone. We did it. No, that's when the response, life cycle kicks in, and you have to go through your own process. So it's extremely important to be able to get not just those alerts, but be able to investigate them fully and be able to determine the things that you need to from IR. So, root cause analysis, scope, so that way you can ensure containment. You can't contain what you don't know. So you have to be able to understand where in the account they exist, or forbid, something deeper, like where in this organization do they exist and which of these OUs are legitimate or not. All of those things, it really does kind of come down to what integrations you're working with, whether that's AWS services or something like OpenSearch or whatever. It doesn't matter really, but for the purpose of this, I'll go specifically with AWS services. But whatever you're using, so whether it's Security Hub to be able to centralize all of the alerts and ingestion and everything, because you can integrate more than just what you have in your AWS logs in the cloud. You can still put in CrowdStrike EDR logs. Like there's a whole bunch of different things you can do, and there's a lot of different services and security tooling that you can add to try to make this more robust. I'm gonna mostly touch on guard duty and security hub integration, but there's a lot of other things too for maybe immediate response or preventative type of things, which we'll go over more next week. But things like WAF, DDoS, like Shield preventative service, or the Shield Advanced, the security incident response service. I don't know why I bring that up. And some others like that, where you want to be able to kind of hit your network security controls like WAF and load balancers, CloudFront, whatever. And then also have your detections. So the reason I bring up security incident response, not for the proactive response, not for the reactive response, but for the proactive response, where the auto triage exists. So that way you're getting those alerts and then hopefully paring down what is important. But in order to do that, it still needs to be integrated with your existing architecture. So for this example, within, control tower, your detective controls have to work with and complement your control tower guardrails. We talked about that not last week, but the week before, because we were on a holiday last week, but the last episode 2 weeks ago. And so those external, not to AWS, but to the control tower service, those types of integrations are going to be extremely important, because control tower isn't quite everything that you'd want. And especially as you get more scale, more complex, you're going to actually have to leverage those config files to integrate, guard duty, and to integrate WAF controls, configuring, like Tristan likes to double touch on, the auditing and compliance aspect. So within Security Hub, that's where you're looking at CIS, PCI, enter whatever compliance framework here, and ensure that those are consistent across your entire, not just account, but organization. Because you don't want to have different, especially with, we have a question.
Yes.
Oh, okay, let's interrupt to do that then.
Yes, it's interesting. We have Bevan that asked this question here is, hello, I was wondering if I can get a pool of CloudTrail logs for a test. So there's a couple different ways to do this, right? So if you're in your AWS account and you have your CloudTrail logs saved to S3, then you can just pull those logs from S3 to do the testing that you want from it. You could go through the AWS command line to view the recent events. You can even do some Python script to pull logs together if you feel like it. Mm-hmm. So a couple different ways to go about it, depending on what you would want to test. So thank you for that. Oh, I should mention CloudTrail Lake and Security Lake and all those good lakes items that you can also do. So yeah. So thank you for that question. And sorry, that question popped up. So
no, absolutely. And no, because simulating malicious traffic is extremely difficult. So that's an excellent question. Totally lost where I was. So compliance frameworks.
I think jogging really quick.
Yeah.
Compliance frameworks. Auditors need compliance to be shown, right? So prove to me that you have this, right? So how do you do that, right? How do you have evidence against this framework? All right, go.
Exactly. Go. So you do have to implement those. You have to select and enable the different compliance frameworks that meet with your whatever your needs are. Everyone has extremely different ones, especially when it comes to compliance. So and then aggregate findings to your security tooling account. So there should be, as we discussed 2 and 3 weeks ago, there should be a specific security account that will deal with and manage like a centralized security. And so you'd want to do that to do that, centralize all of those findings that you're getting from GuardDuty, Security Hub, whatever, and ensure that it's one single repository, so that way your whether it's the automation for your incident response or your security operations, they can look at that one place, look for all of those logs related to the investigation, and have that all basically easy to find in the event of an incident or any sort of investigation, even if it's not necessarily an incident yet. And then allowing those security findings to be tuned. You'll likely need to decrease the noise of some findings and alerts and detections and increase others. That's something that's, I think, just a challenge that all SOCs and detection engineers kind of face is that tuning and getting it to be the right level. So that's definitely another consideration, especially for Control Tower, because as much as this is going to be, a lot of it will be you can do the configuration, but a lot of it will be built out for you. But the tuning and the actual security operations will still need to be done, by your security team. So that's also another consideration.
Yeah. And I think one piece to add to that is if you look at the Control Tower setup, right? If you do a vanilla Control Tower greenfield environment, you're going to have these different accounts, right? One of those items is an audit account. One item is a security tool. One is a log archive account. And the piece that we're really diving into is that log archive account, because within that account, that's where you would send and centralize your findings from CloudTrail, from maybe network firewall, VPC full logs, all those kind of areas, because to Russ's point is you can take that and then start to manipulate it or send it directly to your SIM. Ideally, you would want to reduce the noise, like Russ said, going to your SIM. So you could have something like a security lake in the mix there, right? And then some different ways to transform it. We, on the ProServe side, we have things like SIM optimization that we can take a look at the logs and say, hey, let's set up logs so that we focus on the criticals and highs going down this path, medium goes this way, and then lows go this way. And it just reduces some of the noise, because critical, you want your responders as soon as possible on that. So you want to make sure that it's bubbled to the top. And then on the other side, do you have automated playbooks and things like that? That's a whole other thing when you get into the sim, guard duty kind of responses.
Yep.
But the idea behind that is being able to tailor and customize these logs in such a way that you can respond efficiently. Mm-hmm. Because if you send everything over to your sim, you have maximum visibility. But sometimes if you see everything all at once without the proper lens of truth, right, now it starts to get foggy, right? That's kind of the thing, because if you see everything, you see the whole ocean all at once, how do you search for the penny that fell off the ship? And that's a saying that I just made up, so we'll go with that. And to Bevan's point,
that's a great example, though.
Logs being in the store is expensive. Yes, that is the other side of it. So following stuff like the instant response guide and knowing what logs to kind of that you need for triage and going down that path, right? What do you need when you look at the overall threat map, right? How do you find that out between the different areas? I think that's all important pieces of the puzzle. And if you had to take away one key aspect of this part, alert fatigue is a real thing. And teams face thousands of alerts daily. So being able to stop and investigate all these items in a cohesive manner that hides some of the noise is part of designing your lens, right? This is how you unlock some of the detector controls a little bit more efficiently, because with great power comes great responsibility. Always like to say that title and that phrase, because that's the truth, because you can have all the logs, all the services, but if you don't focus it in such a way, it can become let's say a little bit of a hindrance to rectifying something efficiently.
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah. Especially when you're constantly getting alerts. Not only will alerts stop being an alert and it will just be business as usual, but also getting alerts means that you may not deep dive into them quite as much, especially if there's a lot of them and I have to get through so many of them at a single time. That's when human error comes into play. That's when automation kind of can't overcome the human element of security. So definitely 100% agree. I think that's something that is definitely been talked about more, but still not enough.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, to your point of, hey, this is something we see before or all the time. Mm-hmm. I can clearly see a picture of a senior SOC person and a junior SOC person. And junior asks, like, hey, we got this Macy findings alert. And then yelling across the room is like, that's the same one that always comes in. But it's not, right? Because there's something different about this one. Yep. And that's usually, we suppressed it. We didn't do something. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. I hear the whispers coming from you. Exactly.
I mean, I pick your campaign, insert campaign name here. Yeah. That's how those start. Absolutely.
Exactly. And the thing about that is you have to learn from those legendary items, those legendary stories, those legendary campaigns that happened in previous times, because when you start to get to a point where you have a lot of alerts, you gained up some experience, you still need to figure out ways to go about and level up yourself, right? And the best way to do that is through the concept of side quests. So on this side quest and this transition and this tale as old as time, we start to get down, see, the joke ratio. So if you stick with me, this is a segment of our show where we dive into customer stories and we tell you a couple of interesting fun facts that happened. Through our narrative tale and our voice changing, we start to dive into some of the context. So let us double click into that. All right. You see, I'm trying out new analogies. Let's see if it works in the long run. But in case it doesn't, we have a side quest board, and this side quest board is a visualization of everything we're discussing. So, as always, we set up the board with our AWS environment. We have our S3 bucket. Let's just say there's sensitive information in there. And we have our unauthorized users and our authorized users. So we're in 1-3. So we are using the same context. We are going back to our healthcare technology, Health Sync Alliance, where they set up their control tower 6 months ago. They enhanced it via landing zone 3 months ago. Now, in current days, they're trying to establish their multi-account governance, their centralized networking to launch their new application. But now they face a visibility crisis. And with that visibility crisis, they try to understand what's happening within 47 hospital accounts. Why 47? Because 50 could be down the road if they get this right. So, with no unified threat picture, how does their compliance officer answer the tale as old as time? Are we compliant before we go live? That is the question that we have. So, Russ, I pose to you and to chat. If you have infrastructure, but you can't see what's happening within it, where does your mind go? What happens?
Panic. Immediate panic. I start sweating. I go, oh no, why can't I see anything? Yeah, no, a little bit of panic for real. So I'm going, okay, well, where are my logs? Where are my security services sending out my alerts to? Oh, looks like I got one right.
Yes. Where are my logs? What's happening with my environment? Where are my API calls through CloudTrail?
Okay, so those ones were right, but panic, not so much.
Yes. Hold on, I'll put this black marker for the black fog. So we have the CloudTrail logs. That is one of the mechanisms that we are looking into. We're looking to collaborate our story. We're looking to go through and understand the next steps. So I think part of the conversation, as we like to go to, is, all right, I have these logs, but I'm looking to see what are the threats within my environment. Because how do I know what's happening? Do I have a layer of visibility? I have 47 accounts within my control tower environment. Is guard duty enabled throughout all of 47? Are those logs being aggregated and centralized? Because how do I have an idea of guard duties actually catching something? I think that's a key component that we have to think about, right? Because if you have a centralized logging archive account, okay, I go there to look for the logs, but there's other pieces of the puzzle that I need to consider. We spoke about VPC flow logs. We spoke about in past side quests, Route 53 resolver queries. But Russ, what is something centralized that we can look at in order to continue our tale?
Centralized as in log repository?
So, centralized log repository, there could be something else, someone else, something else, like Security Hub as well, to go down this path. Because the challenge, right? This is a challenge that we're getting. We have 47 hospital accounts. Guard duty, let's say it's enabled everywhere. Security Hub, is it activated and aggregated? That's a key component, because compliance scores may be invisible at the org level. So these are all pieces of the puzzle, because think if we're healthcare, that means HIPAA. These two go hand in hand. You need to have continuous monitoring across all your accounts in your environments. So I think part of the story is figuring out these pieces of this log aggregation trail that we have, the visibility. So what is something else that we need to consider or should consider?
Config rules.
Yes. Config rules is a big part of the puzzle as well. So if we have config, let's imagine it somewhere in the middle because I cannot find the tile right now. So when we think of config, it's the invisible hand that is checking our resource configurations, right? Invisible whispers. For you D&D players, you get
invisible hand of configuration.
So
sorry, I'm going to be using that a lot.
Yes, right. So it's part of the puzzle pieces that we're trying to assemble, because ideally, if we have sensitive information, especially within a healthcare environment, we're looking at something like Macy as well as part of the puzzle and part of our path. Because ideally, we know where the sensitive information. We have the tagging strategy, hopefully, where hey, there's a data classification tag or something along those lines that say this is sensitive, this has PHI, this has PII, this is production, this is non-prod. All those kind of pieces of the puzzle that we look at. But I think part of that is just coming down to the identity piece, right? As the last piece of that puzzle. Because if we are following our path of log, visibility, and aggregation, one of the pieces that I think tend to get revisited opposed to, hey, we need to do this now, is levels of access. Are we running something like IAM Access Analyzer within the environment just to say, hey, we're doing a migration, hey, we're spinning up an app? Is everybody supposed to have access to what they're supposed to? Is a key question, because as we go down, hey, we may need the lens of truth to figure out some things. Otherwise, hey, if we don't have that solution in place, the music changes. You hear it change.
It's not good.
It's not good when this happens. Because without the lens of truth, you could say, hey, we got breached, but we couldn't figure out what happened for days. Or ask how or why we monitor for certain threats. Or, hey, Security Hub shows 5,000 findings. How do we deal with it? I think it's all relevant pieces of the puzzle that we're trying to get to. And the solution is what you lay out here so that we get back onto the subtle path. We start to build up a little bit more confidence. Why? Because we have visibility within our defense and depth strategy. We have guard duty centralized. We have CloudTrail centralized. We have Security Hub. We have config invisibly centralized as well to figure out all these different pieces of the puzzle. We have that threat illumination. I'm going to run out of different analogies, but essentially
we have Bannerlord music.
Yeah. We have all this epic music playing for the reason of we have the understanding of our environment. We have the lens of truth, but can we fully utilize it? And that's where we hit the pause game button, right? Zach Moore's timeout, as we call it, and we start to take that step back and think about this a little bit more. So if we have all these pieces built in, how do we have our mastery increase? I think that's the dramatic pause. And what I mean by that is when you think about you have this lens of truth that's able to provide visibility into your different AWS layers, your different detective services. But when do you use it? Do you always use it? Or do you target it? And I think part of that is just understanding the basics, like CloudTrail versus config, right? Organizational trails versus account level trails. When do you use each of them? For organizational trails, you capture API activity across all your member accounts into a single centralized local, right? And when you think of account level, you're providing workload teams with dedicated logs to application troubleshooting. And this is an important concept to understand because this goes back to identity. This goes back to how things are troubleshooted in your environment, right? And part of this all boils back down to target state security strategy. If I haven't said it today, I have to say it 3 times for the people on the other side of the internet. Because without organizational trails, security teams have to aggregate logs from dozens, hundreds of different individual accounts. And then that could create a gap in visibility because manual, as Russ mentioned before. So that's an important part. Now, custom config rules. Can I just use, hey, the config rules for my organization? Well, Custom rules, they use the Lambda functions in order to evaluate resources specific to your environmental needs, right? Think of it like your unique business requirements, because there's always unique business requirements. Even if you don't think you have them, there are unique business requirements. So custom config rules are usually a great way to go, especially within a healthcare space, right? Because you have internal tagging standards. You may have industry-specific security policies, all these items where, hey, you can use and leverage different conformance packs and things of that nature, but your compliance requirements may differ. You may need something else, and that's where custom config rules come into play. But leverage conformance packs. That's where we're going to, right? You need a balance of both. And like I said before, it's a recipe. It's not a situation where you say, oh, I just need this or this. It's, hey, I need a little sprinkle of this and a little dab of that in order to come out with the plate that you need. And part of that is the overall understanding of how I correlate all these different pieces of the puzzle together. So if you think of something like CloudTrail events and config changes, say if you have a scenario where, hey, I need to figure out the root cause of how this happened within my environment, where do you go? That's what we're heading towards. That's our North Star. That's our guiding piece of the puzzle. Because during security incident, and Russ may know a little bit about this part, right? Knowing a security group change is useless without knowing who changed it. I think that's a safe assumption, because you're going to continue to see different groups change unless you kind of figure that piece out.
Yep.
How often have you seen that, where it's just like you have an incident happen and it's like, hey, this one item changed. Who did it come from?
All the time. Logs give you tons of information, but they don't give you intent. So it's hard sometimes to determine, okay, was this a change made by an attacker or a system administrator who maybe needs a little extra training? They look really similar. So that's, absolutely 100%.
Yeah. And again, it could be both.
Context matters.
Yes. Yeah. It could be both, where it's like, hey, I opened Quad Zeros to test my EKS application, and now, there's something else happening within the environment because it was exposed. So I think part of it is the overall thought process. So I think another poll is at hand, right, when we think about this. So when you think of your boss battles on a daily basis, I think it's important to consider, and feel free to put 1, 2, 3, or 4 inside of the chat to add your pieces to this conversation. So, Russ, which way are you going for this one?
I would probably say number 1.
Yes, alert fatigue.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the number 1 biggest thing, especially because it really does take a bit of investigation to really determine, hey, is this something that is allowed to be happening or supposed to be happening, or is this another indicator that we are breached or compromised, or whatever word you want to use. And so I think number 1 is something that's commonly faced by most people in security. And I think that tuning just isn't maybe as celebrated, I guess would be the word, celebrated as it should be. But I think that that's definitely a case. A lot of the time we want things to just work right out of the box. And with detections and detective controls, those are just so personalized to your environment that it's like, you just can't get out of the box to be at a good point with alerts and alert fatigue. So I'm going to put that down.
Yeah. And I think to add into that as well is oftentimes when you take it out of the box and say, hey, just look at everything, report on everything. That's when, one, alert fatigue, it kind of leads also into financial pieces that other stakeholders look at of, hey, why does this cost so much? Well, it's because to your point, Russ, it wasn't tuned. Now they say, hey, do we really need this whole block? Like VPC flow logs is usually one of those areas where do we need to capture all the VPC flow logs? Can we just turn it off because we have this? And it's not that VPC flow logs are, let's say, not important. It's just if you put every single flow log, then you might have some redundancy. You may not be capturing what you have intended. There's ways to optimize capturing it because, again, going back to the guides, it's one of the pieces during an incident response. And correct me if I'm wrong, Russ, but that's kind of one of the pieces that you're looking at, right? You have the IP and the source address, all those kind of things. Great information to have. So, to your point, 1 is very important, but I still lean towards 3 after all that, because proving to auditors what happened and when. And sometimes this could just be the simple case of, hey, in this hypothetical situation, can you prove to me that you did X, Y, and Z? And that's usually when we start to have those design conversations, right? Where, okay, how are we aggregating logs? How are we showing evidence? All these different pieces of the puzzle together. And I think it's a certain methodology we have to follow when we're looking at that. And part of that methodology is understanding what we have. Because 47 accounts, if you don't have the proper governance and target security strategy, then it starts to become a little bit messy to figure out because, hey, this may be part of acquisition. They handle it this way. We handle it that way. Okay, who looks at both? Well, we have an understanding, right? There starts to be some conversations that I had. And what you start to feel as you're speaking through it, as you're walking through it, is that sense of, what is it? Anxiety, right? A little bit of just like, turn up, right? Because when you start to have these different pieces of the puzzle that aren't linked together, see, I got Russ again. Yeah. You start to think about, hey, is our environment scalable? Do we have the right resources in place from a personnel standpoint and from a services standpoint and third-party even services standpoint, right? Because if we have maybe an acquisition that may be using Splunk and they have the on-prem version and then they have the cloud version and then they have their incident responders looking at Splunk, but they're not looking in the AWS environment. They're looking over here and then, oh, where's the run book? Oh, the run book is for this, right? So you don't have those tailored actions. So part of this, 1, is highly encouraged the upskilling. And the way you do that is kind of going through, certifications, right? It's a simple pause because it gets everybody on the same page. If you're speaking about AWS security and understanding IAM roles and user accounts and how you shouldn't use user and you should use roles, those are kind of big pieces of the puzzle. Other piece of that is going on knowledge quests. And for you first-time joiners, you may say, hey, what's a knowledge quest? Well, I will tell you, good patron, is a knowledge quest is those pieces of deep dives of information based on your level that you start to figure out, hey, I need to dive into this a little bit more. I want to be a little bit more proactive. I want to be that hero in training, the starting hero that has the wooden shield and everything, right? How do I start as a level 100 when we're speaking about AWS knowledge? That's kind of where we're going with the knowledge quest. And the best way to do that is understanding, hey, what are some of the core aspects of AWS fundamentals, especially from a security perspective, a security lens? Well, I would argue part of that is understanding what maybe the security pillar is, especially within the well-architected framework. So understanding this piece of the puzzle is, 1, interesting from the perspective of well-architected. What does it mean? Hey, you can click it in and dive in and kind of go through. But here's the spoilers right here. You follow these 6 pillars. Right? Yeah, little spoilers, right? So I saved you 1 click, right? So operational excellence, security, reliability, performance efficiency, all these items that you have to consider. And these work together, right? They come together like a certain lion robot. But the key takeaway from this is understanding, one, security is top priority. So how do we delve into that? Well, we spoke about what is control tower and the fundamentals of control tower and what it's trying to achieve. And it's a simple way to add governance into your greenfield environment, right? If your organization that is migrating to AWS and you want to have these, let's say, key guardrails, these key detectives, these key services, this is kind of where you're starting out as that starting hero, is just understanding, hey, what comes in control tower? What are some of the features? What are some of the different areas? What is the terminology? And I always go to the terminology because once you understand the terminology, you start to speak in the language of, hey, I'm heading towards something. I can speak about something. If something happens, I can kind of go by and say, hey, I have a control tower and I recently enhanced it with LZA, and the LZA is doing so-and-so and is doing this and is doing that. You start to be able to formulate a position within your environment. And what I mean by formulate a position in your environment is you can say what you have enabled. Right? That's a key thing because often, I don't know if you've seen this, Russ, is when you're speaking to somebody about the AWS environment, you kind of see where their maturity level is by where they start when they speak. Mm-hmm. It's like, hey, I have this set up with this, and that. Okay, now you can begin to say, okay, you should head down this path because based on your current maturity level, you can start to add enhancements, especially from a detective variety this way, right? And detective, now you can start to talk about guard duty. And again, concepts and key terms. What's a delegated admin? Hey, what are these different instances of guard duty? Well, there's malware protection, there's S3 protection, backward. It's a conversation that you have. And then you could go into CloudTrail and so on and so forth. And then before you know it, you level up to a veteran because now you speak the terminology. Now you can go down the routes. So, Russ, when you think of a veteran adventurer, kind of comes to your mind?
When I think of veteran, I think of been there, done that. So people that have actually experienced and gone through.
Yes. They actually have an architectural diagram too. That's one of the key parts, right? You have the architectural diagram because you shift sometimes from that builder, like, hey, I'm jumping in and just configuring and turn all these services, to knowing holistically how everything works together because you built it up over time with your experience points, right? That's kind of where I'm going with it. It's funny because sometimes what happens is you're speaking with customers and a lot of this stuff lives within the code. And it's, okay, this is where it is in the code. It's like, okay, how does this work? Well, this person handles that part of it. And this person handles that part of it. But you don't have the holistic picture. And when you don't have the holistic picture, that's kind of where you start to see the gaps. You have the lens of truth, but you can't see everything. Yep. So that's where this comes into play. Right? And knowing how landing zone accelerator works, how multi-account strategy works within AWS, and just knowing overall, hey, what the security reference architecture looks like. And are we aligned from that standpoint? Right? When it comes to the building blocks of our organization, how are we managing all these different pieces? And it kind of leads you towards that level of, one, experience, but also, two, you start to become a little bit of a legendary figure because you understand some of the best practices. You understand the patterns that other customers have implemented successfully within their environment. Now you can start to go back to, like, hey, I want to figure out what the LZA is. I want to see, hey, how do I kind of manipulate this to my environment? Or how do I go to a conformance pack and implement that into config? Because this is a set of rules that maybe we need to follow specific HIPAA guidelines. Now we have this piece in the environment. So these are all pieces of best practices and operational guidance that you can start to implement to become that legend. So, Russ, when we're becoming legendary, we like to, 1, read, 2, experiment, and 3, experiment again, right? It's like that famous line of create the plan, execute the plan goes off the rails, throw away the plan, and then start again. So what we like to consider those are side quests, because you're going off on these little tangents and eventually building up enough experience points to level up yourself and the environment and everything like that. But if you had to wrap up today's detective talk, Russ, what are some of the key points that you would get across today?
Yeah, so I think some of the key points would be, you don't have to do everything, especially in terms of things like logging. You can rely on your defense in depth, and your detective controls that you're implementing. There are, well, you also have to test them, but that's how you can you can trust and rely on them, is because you've tested them, you've done the research, you've read all of the documentation. We don't like to be those types of people that say, read the manual, but a little bit it does come down to that. Everyone's been saying it for 60 years for a reason. But also, using that ability to go into workshops and actually put this into practice, and use that knowledge that you're gaining to not just learn at the holistic level, but also specifically about your environment, your work environment. What not only what is an SRA, but like, how has your organization managed that? How do they, what is in their target state security strategy? Like, ask those questions, find out. So yeah, kind of diving deep a little bit. I think that's kind of the main point that I took away from this episode.
Yeah, because as always, knowing is half the battle, right? And now that you know a little bit more, now you can start to go down the route of exploring those different avenues, because now you know. And part of it is, hey, I have these detective controls in my environment. Are they customized? Are they configured in a way that help my overall business requirements meet what they need to meet? Compliance regulations, internal or customer needs. So keep on building, keep on exploring. And the last piece of the puzzle, Russ, what is that?
Create an incident response plan. Please and thank you.
Exactly. 100% create one. We will applaud you. The crowd will applaud you.
Thank you.
And anybody will be happy for that. So while you do that, we'll, keep doing what we do. Come back here every week. Monday, 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 2 p.m. Eastern, in order to dive in, have fun, and start to
maybe learn a little bit.
Early.
We'll laugh, but we'll learn.
Yeah, learn a little bit, learn a lot, and laugh a lot. So till next time, I would say cheers. Take care.